How do you make the perfect zero trust policy? Welcome to Threat Talks. My name is Lieuwe Jan Koning, and here from the Security Operations Center floor at Ontoit, we bring you Threat Talks, the deep dive. And the subject of today is step 4 in the 5-step process of zero trust: create a zero trust policy. Let's get on to it.
Welcome to Threat Talks. Let's delve deep into the dynamic world of cybersecurity.
Let me introduce our guest, big friend of the show, creator of the show actually, Rob Maas. Welcome. You're the field CTO of Ontoit, and Rob Maas, his day job is to make sure that zero trust is implemented everywhere. If I have to summarize it really quickly,
that's
right?
Correct.
Rob, we're going to talk about step 4 in zero trust. I mean, we did the whole series, and there's also going to be a step 5 because it's the 5-step program of zero trust. Shall we start by really briefly reiterating? We already did 3 steps. What were those 3 steps and why?
Okay. So we do the 5 steps of zero trust. The first step is we're going to look at what we want to protect, and it's called define your protect services. So everything that we really want to protect from a business perspective can be defined as a protect service, and that's step 1. Then step 2, once we have a few of those protect services, we need to know which protect services are need to communicate with each other and are also allowed to communicate with each other. And that's also something we look back on today. On step 3, we look per protect service, what kind of security measures we want to implement. So like segment the protect service, put ransomware protection on it, endpoint protection, think about backup, all those kinds of security controls that you can think of. We define them in step 3, and also step 3 is the place where the architect steps in to translate all those requirements into an actual plan that can be implemented in the operation.
Yeah, so if we've done all those 3 steps in zero trust for a particular, let's say for our file sharing appliance, I don't know, then we know what we're talking about, we know who needs access, and we also have the controls in place in step 3. And now we can actually go create firewall rules, I imagine, right?
Yeah. So we have all the tools in place to protect the protect surface, but still we need to define who is allowed to have access, what kind of applications, create policies, and that's all what's happening in step 4.
Okay, yeah, we're going to talk today about the method. Many people know the Kipling method about what is a good policy. Then we're going to talk about the validation of that policy. I mean, it's nice
also
that we
an
have
important step.
Yeah, and then let's see. Many people think of firewalls when we're talking about policy, but there's so much beyond it. We'll also touch on that
exactly
today. Okay. The Kipling method. Maybe first, if you're talking about zero trust policy, do we mean really like a firewall rule, or do we mean a document, or what is this?
It's a bit of both, because with zero trust, we completely, for every step, we reflect back on what the business needs are. So the business needs to decide, okay, this is what's needed to do my job. So, for example, salespeople need access to the customer relationship management system. There might be a policy that they are allowed to do that from home, but maybe only during working hours, for example. That's the business policy. The business needs their salespeople to be able to access.
It's like a use case in development.
Yeah, it's pretty close. And then,
but you're not meaning about it. It's not like the IT policy for remote work or so, or is that also?
It can influence the policy that will be created on this protect service, because maybe the company has a strict policy on we don't allow working from home. That also means then that the salespeople cannot access the CRM system, or are not allowed to access the CRM system from home. So those policies can influence the policies that are being enforced on the protect service itself.
Yeah, so you might say there's different perspectives that you can look at.
Yeah, so this is really, we start with the business perspective, and it can be influenced by a global policy that's within the company. But then once you know what the business policy is, it needs to be translated to the firewall. Not on every firewall I can say sales is allowed to go to CRM systems. So
can
maybe
even say it.
Sorry?
You can say it. You need to type it in.
You need to
be a nerd, right?
And then not every, let's stick to the firewall. Not every firewall, for example, can work with the user groups, and then you need to translate something to IP addresses. So it's also a bit dependent on the tools you use, how easy it is to translate the business policy into an operational policy.
Okay. And how does Kipling work?
Yeah, so Kipling is
who's Kipling?
I believe it was an army guy who trusted his his people, and he had a verse around it that he always should ask the right questions. I forgot the verse, I don't know it by head, but it was who, what, when, why, how, and I forgot one, where.
Yeah.
So 5W is 1H is the same, but that's called the Kipling method. And the idea is if you have an answer to all these questions, you have quite a good policy.
You're specific enough.
You're specific enough.
So it focuses you to make it really, so you don't say, yes, everybody can go to the internet. That's too broad. Then.
That's way too broad. Yeah. You should make it specific.
Can you have an example? Let's first focus on firewalls alone.
Okay.
You have an example of something, a policy that is properly defined according to Kipling?
I think the example we just had about sales to CRM, we can extend it a bit. So we can allow sales to go to CRM. Maybe the use case is to log their visits. They went to a customer, they need to log it. They only are allowed to exit it during working hours, and maybe they are allowed to exit it during working hours from home because they're traveling, they're visiting customers. They need to log their visit. So during working hours, they are allowed to access the CRM application from home, and that's already quite specific. And I think we answered then all the questions from the Kipling method.
Yeah, and then the translation into actual technical thing happens. Huh? You mentioned you cannot say to most firewalls the sales department.
Yeah, it's shifting.
So what do you do?
But still, not every firewall supports that. So now the technical engineers come in that need to make a technical policy of this business policy. So they need to translate it. And if your firewall doesn't support user groups, for example, then you probably end up with typing in IP addresses and making sure everyone gets a static IP once they connect to your VPN. So it makes it much more complicated. But those are the restrictions you get from the tools. But if you have a more modern firewall, then you probably can work with user groups, which makes it easy because then you can say just everyone part of the AD group sales. Mm-hmm. Is allowed to.
And how does that work under the hood? Because last time I checked, if I want to do an ODBC connection or HTTP, maybe has some kind of authentication in it. Mm-hmm. But maybe I want to send Windows file sharing packet. There's no authentication in the header of this. In every packet, I mean.
So the who is not necessarily a user. Can also be a device. Nowadays, we see even device IDs on modern firewalls. So then you can also abstract the IP address a bit away. But in the end...
What would that be then? Printers? Something like
that? You can have group printers. I'm playing with this at home. I, for example, have a group Sonos speakers. So they are allowed to go to Sonos.
I bet your home network is full of Kipling policy.
Well, I do my best. Sometimes it's hard, but I do my best, yeah.
We challenge all the hackers out there to get into his Sonos now. Yeah. All right. So... that's how policy should read. We get a feel of how specific it has to be. Who actually does the execution of the policy? I mean, it sounds like you really need to know a lot. So I mean, you leverage the data we get it in step one, like the IP address or group names or whatever. In 2, we know the boundaries. Mm-hmm. In 3, we know which equipment we need to put in, but then it needs to be put into the equipment. So this sounds like a security engineer, firewall administrators, endpoint protection administrators. Are those the people?
Yeah, the firewall administrators, application administrators, because you can also have policies on application level, endpoint you mentioned already. So all the engineers that more or less put the configuration on the controls that we defined in step 3 are now involved by, hey, make sure that there's the correct policy executed. So if you have a endpoint protection solution, then maybe you want to enable by policy the ransomware protection module. That's also a policy. It's slightly different than the firewall policy, but it's a step you want to take.
I could have asked this question to all these guys there because they do this on a daily. That's their job, right? To do this because you can outsource this part. I mean, it's the business rule. An organization has to, or the business owner has to do, but the actual implementation can be done by another team or someone else or someone external.
Yeah, exactly. And especially if you have your protect services well defined, then a SOC should be able to translate everything quite easily into a technical policy.
Yeah, good. Hey, then the next item we were to talk about is validation of all this. I mean, it's nice to to create policy, but policy decays. I mean, applications are decommissioned. Policy doesn't necessarily get removed automatically.
No, it typically does it not. So that's maybe the most overlooked step. So it's quite easy to create a policy. So if someone deploys a new application and if it is not working, they go to the firewall administrator and say, okay, this is not working. Can you create a policy for it? So that's a very natural process. Otherwise, the application will simply not run. But if that application is being removed,
and nobody complains.
Nobody complains. So also nobody thinks about, hey, maybe we should remove that rule that exists in the firewall.
Why do we put it at step 4? We also have step 5, which says monitor and maintain. And you can argue, hey, this sounds like maintenance, but you're putting it into
it's
policy creation.
The debate is more that those 5 steps, monitor and maintain, you should completely, you have continuous improvements. So you can continuously go over all these 5 steps. Maybe the business owner of a protect services changes, so that's typically a step 1 procedure. Maybe a new protect service needs access to your protect service that you are maintaining, so that's step 2. Maybe a new control arises or a new need for a control arises, so then you need to adjust step 3.
It's an iterative process. If I am the business owner of the CRM application, I need to from time to time look at the policy.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not 5 steps and then forget about it. You need to redo them.
It's infinite steps, but they very much look like 5 steps.
Yeah,
repeatedly. Yeah,
repeatedly.
It's a bit like the Inca calendar, right?
Yeah.
Looks like it's ending, but it's really not. Yeah. Okay. So, but what kind of things should you validate then? I mean, we'll talk about different controls later, but let's first talk about the firewall again. Mm-hmm. So we made a firewall rule set. What should we validate? What part?
So on creation of the policy, we should check with step 2 if that policy is allowed, if we expect traffic between those 2 protect services. Because in step 2 we decided, hey, this protect service A, for example, is allowed to talk to protect service B. If that's not defined there...
So laptops can talk to the CRM application on a network level.
For example, yeah. And then if we did not define it there, then we should have a debate on, should it be there or should it be not there? And
so it could be that there's a change request, mm-hmm. and it asks for a certain access, and then in step 2 we did not decide to allow it.
Yeah, maybe we get a change request for marketing should also be able to talk to the CRM system. And then if it is not in step 2 defined, we should have a discussion between the 2 business owners of those protect services. So probably one person of the marketing department and the other one of the CRM system. And they should come to a mutual consensus that traffic is really allowed. And if not, then we should not create that policy.
Mm-hmm. And that's what you continuously evaluate, because step 2 may change as well. Your insights may. So, any other things that should be done during policy validation? Our tech department has created policy validation modules, so there's a lot to unwrap here.
So you should make sure that your policy is very specific. So prevent the most basic example is allow any rule. Might be fine and good for testing, but make sure that you remove it, and I'll try to prevent it at all if possible. So that's the thing you need to check. But also if the policy is really strict enough. So if you have a next-gen firewall, for example, then you can make a policy based upon layer 4, but the next-gen firewall is all about doing it on layer 7. So make sure you create your policies based upon application, that you do the scanning of the traffic, implement decryption if it is a requirement that is being forced in step 3.
So you're really re-evaluating every aspect of every firewall rule. And if it says TCP 25, for example, we need to change it into SMTP probably.
Yeah, correct.
Those kind of things.
So you really want to move and also make the most use of the tooling you have.
Yeah, do we see that equipment has capabilities that's not utilized because it's simply not configured?
Very often, and even worse nowadays, a lot of equipment get automatic updates, and sometimes they come also with new features. And what we see a lot, for example, with customers is they have bought this firewall and they think, okay, we can go on for it for another 3, 4, or 5 years whenever the new renewal is coming up. And then they migrated all the old policies to the new firewall. Maybe if you're lucky, then they do a kind of an upgrade of the policies where possible at that time. And then they forget about it till the renewal comes up. And then in the meantime, they have a lot of new features that are more or less for free, but not used, and that's a shame.
So we see it often. That indeed that there is URL filtering, for example. There's new categories or finer grained URL categories that are now possible.
That's a very simple example indeed. And then if I look for Palo Alto Networks firewalls, for example, those new categories normally come in an allow mode so that they don't cause any disruptions with customers. But it also means that there's no visibility on all the URLs that fall in that category.
Yeah, because allow sounds positive, but it's actually do not log and allow.
Yeah, so no
visibility anymore.
Yeah, one of the things that most vendors will do with new updates is not turn them on or turn them on in a way that they are not in the way of the customer, because they don't want a reputation that their updates cause any trouble.
Yeah, you don't want to cause a P1. But so you need to do the extra effort continuously to keep the system fit, right? And that's why, and luckily we can do a lot of that in an automated fashion.
You can automate that.
But you need to do it. You need. So if you put in a firewall, that's what you're saying. If you put in a firewall, make a perfect policy according to Kipling and everything. Mm-hmm. Then a year later, or next major firmware upgrade, or even a content update, it might still be off. So you need to constantly look at that. That's
ideally you do that with automatically. And you scan for it with every change, for example, or every day. You just get the config and check if everything is in place. But if that's not possible, make sure you have people that do it on a regular basis.
Yeah, it's a substantial portion of our work to push for these changes, indeed. So we've talked about firewall. Let's go beyond the firewall a little bit, because policy, as you described, it's functional, and sometimes functional maybe doesn't really translate into, at least it's not enforceable firewall. For example, if I have a SaaS application and I want to be in control of my flows.
Yeah.
So let's say Office 365, and now I decide in step 3, I need to be in control of my inbound and outbound flows. I probably will require that of myself because it's such an important application.
I was hoping that more customers would require that of themselves. Because
we would still certainly suggest everybody to require.
So doesn't matter which cloud application it is, but one of the benefits, but also the downsides of cloud is that everyone is able to knock at your door. So most cloud providers...
because you're not going to call Microsoft if they answer the phone in the first place. Hey, listen, tell me, show me the firewall rules, and
they are not,
that are there for my instance of Office 365.
No, they're not going to give you. They give you a lot of tools, especially Microsoft 365, and the more mature a SaaS application is, the more controls you will get there, where you can tune your policy. But specifically, for your request, if you run things in the cloud, there's always network needed to get access to that cloud. So the network
the fact that you don't see it and can't control it doesn't mean it's there.
No, it's still there. It's just, we call it the internet. But what you can do as a company is steer the traffic of your customers over a firewall, and the most modern solution for that is SASE. So where I would say the firewall runs in the cloud. It's more than just a firewall, but it's in the cloud, and your employees will connect to the SASE environment, normally closely to home, so you have a good connection, and then the traffic is going to your cloud or to your data center, and then you can make very nice policies, because on your SaaS side you can say, okay, only traffic from my SASE solution is allowed, and that will greatly lower your attack factor, your attack surface, because now only your employees can access your SaaS application, and nobody else can try to come in.
So, but we don't see these often enough. Many companies simply open Office 365
very slowly.
Yeah. So what companies typically do, they allow users working from home, from their home equipment, to log on to Office 365 and then somehow trust the security of Office
directly.
365.
Yeah, and that means also so hopefully multi-factor authentication is enabled everywhere. But if a attacker gains access to credentials or even to the multi-factor method
or
that's
to
being
your home
used,
PC.
Yeah, to your home
and
PC,
we know they are there.
Then they can simply log into this environment. So
you need to enforce your users to use company equipment that's properly controlled. Otherwise, you will not be in control of this application then.
Yeah, and
what you're saying with SASE, what happens is my laptop needs to be validated, and there's endpoint protection and all on there. And then my SASE application makes sure that every traffic I send from my laptop gets through the company's equipment. That can be distributed in a cloud, it doesn't matter. It can be in the data center, whatever. And from there, it gets to the Office 365.
Yeah, and then on the Office 365 side, you define that traffic is only allowed from your company equipment. And
so
you have multiple ways of doing
because
that.
if I know my username and I can still go to my home PC, but that's then blocked because of that reason.
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's from do many SaaS applications. I imagine we know that Office 365 understands this kind of stuff, and there can be header insertion.
Yeah, so there are two main options here. Header insertion is for I would say the bigger SaaS solutions. So Microsoft 365, Google supports this as well. I believe Salesforce supports this.
What is it?
So header insertion means that you define a header on your SaaS application. Maybe just let's make it very simple.
You mean an HTTP header that your browser sends along with?
HTTP header, because SaaS normally is all web-based. So you can enforce your firewall to insert the same header as that you configured on the SaaS side. And if that matches, then Office 365 says, okay, you're welcome. You can try to log in. If somebody without that header connects to your Office 365 environment, they will simply be blocked. They don't even get a login page.
Yeah, so it's a way to tell your SaaS application, hey, listen, only allow traffic from this firewall because that's what I have scanned already.
Yeah, and this is based on header insertion. So the larger SaaS application supports this. If you have a smaller SaaS provider, then what they normally support is whitelisting by IP addresses.
Yeah, so and since you control the traffic, you can actually control the outbound IP through net. Yeah, okay. Do all SaaS applications support this?
For IP allow listing, almost every, at least all the SaaS applications I have seen support this. So,
well, I have a few debates with a couple of
maybe if you go very small ones, then
exactly. Indeed, yeah. All right. So that's firewalls in SaaS. What about endpoint protection? I mean, there's lots of policy there as well. Is that also part of step 4?
Yeah. We should also think. So in step 3, we define the controls, but the control in itself doesn't do much if there's no policy around it. So we can have a very fancy XDR endpoint protection tool, but if we don't configure it right, then it won't block anything. Hopefully, out of the box it will. But
we have an example of a Kipling validated policy for.
Kipling will be already a bit harder, but you should try to fill in all the 5 Ws and the 1 H as far as possible. But if you look at endpoint, it's more about what applications are allowed to run. That can be more or less in line with Kipling, but also what kind of protection is enabled. Do we enable the ransomware protection module or not? Those kind of configurations you typically see on the endpoint.
Yeah, and let's take one last example. Identity providers.
Mm-hmm.
They can also be, for some reason, we've seen big hacks, like with the police department last year, where the multi-factor is simply poorly configured.
Yeah, that's so on identity providers.
To me, it's mind-boggling that it's possible to configure multi-factor authentication in a way that is harmful, right? Why would an IDP provider offer this option in the first place? I mean, it should be secure by default, if you ask me. Mm-hmm. But do you have some examples of what you should?
Yeah, with
what would policy validation look like when we're talking about?
For identity providers, what we see a lot now is conditional-based access. So you need to not only have multiple factors, but also you might need to connect from a certain location or within a certain time. So to limit the ability to log in. So you can make a very strict policy when you're allowed to log in and when not. So that really also lowers the attack surface for an attacker, because it is very limited from where you can log in what time, with what kind of device. So then it will be really hard for an attacker.
Very specific when the identity provider says yes to
exactly. Make it as specific as possible, but that counts for every policy you create.
Yeah, that's maybe the big common factor here, right? It's specific, really. Close to what the business needs.
Yeah, so it should be there should be a justification for your policy. So there should be a business need for it. Otherwise, the policy should not exist. If there's no reason to create it, don't create it. And it should be really strict, very specific on what's allowed.
Yeah. Rob, we're running out of time, but there's one thing that I actually also want to discuss, and it's about admin accounts, because we create all kinds of firewall policy, but typically an admin needs access to a lot. And if you need to make it really specific, then that doesn't work, because it's always a pain. And in the P1 situation, you need to have quick access. There's a lot to unwrap on the. Shall we do an extra, like a step 4A episode on stepping stones?
I think we can do that. If we go over the 5 steps for administrative access, I think we can come to a good solution.
Okay, well, let's table this item then for a moment. And because we ran out of time. Thank you very much. I mean, we discussed a lot, all the way from what a Kipling method is, and some very tangible examples of what it would look like. And I believe we have a good idea now on what a proper policy should be.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And to our viewers, thank you very much. Thank you for tuning in today. If you liked it, please like us, because it helps us show this video and this podcast to other people also, and that's part of our mission. So we would thank you for that. And if you're there, a review would also be really appreciated. You could also press the subscribe button. That means that that next episode on admin accounts will be in your inbox in the next few episodes. Thank you very much for tuning in. And from the Security Operations Center floor here at Onto It, thank you once again. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Threat Talks, a podcast by Onto It Cybersecurity and AMS-IX. Did you like what you heard? Do you want to learn more? Follow Threat Talks to stay up to date on the topic of cybersecurity.